Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Panning Leadership. This is Randy Haas, excited to bring you another episode. Tonight we're going to have a two-part in one, and we're going to talk about purpose. And I want to ask you a question to start things off with. What if I were to ask you, how do you know that you're alive? What comes to mind when you hear that question? How do you know that you're alive? And hopefully by the end of this episode, you'll kind of have an answer to that if anybody ever asks you that. Steve Jobs once said that being the richest man in the cemetery doesn't matter to me. Going to bed at night saying we've done something wonderful, that's what matters to me. So Steve Jobs said that, hey, doing something wonderful is more important than making a lot of money. I think you'll all agree that he knows a little bit about making a lot of money, or knew a little bit about making a lot of money. But his concern was that he didn't want to be just the richest man in the cemetery, because you can't take the money with you. So we're in leadership, and we're in enterprise, most of us. Some people that listening may be in charitable organizations, and that's just, as part of this podcast as anything. But it has to be, and for the charitable organizations, you already know this, it has to be about more than money. It has to be about something higher. So we need to have a purpose in life. And if we're going to be great leaders, then we need to not only understand our purpose, not only understand where we're going, but be able to unlock that purpose in other people, be able to help other people find their purpose. And when we do that, that ignites a fire that allows the organization or the group or the team just to burn even brighter than it did before. Doctors have found that people with purpose in their lives are less prone to disease. Purpose is increasingly being touted as a key to navigating the complex, volatile, ambiguous world we live in today, where strategy is ever-changing and few decisions are obviously right or wrong. I think we can all, I see for myself that we do live in a world where it seems like the emphasis is more on making things gray and creating indecision rather than creating decision. And I think that causes a lot of undue stress in our work, in ourselves, and in everything around us. So we want to figure out a way to be rid of that, to be decisive, to have a purpose, to have some sort of guiding light that tells us where to go. That quote about the doctors, that's from a Harvard Business Review article from 2014. So why purpose? Well, purpose brings clarity. One of the first things I want to talk about is purpose brings clarity and allows you to dig in. In other words, when you have purpose, you have a measuring stick with which to measure your actions by. Am I doing something that is contributing to my purpose, or am I not doing something that's contributing to my purpose? And we all want to contribute, but if we don't know what we want to contribute to, it kind of just spin in circles, Bob Dylan has a song that was recorded, that was published posthumously on his final album that his son published, called Any Road. That is, the lyrics are basically, if you don't know where you're going, then any road will get you there, which is reference back to Alice in Wonderland with the Cheshire Cat. And the dialogue between the cat and Alice was Alice asking, and I'm paraphrasing, give me a hint, give me some advice, which way should I go? And the cat says, well, where do you want to go? And she says, I don't really care. And he says, well, if you don't care, then it doesn't matter which road you take. And she said, well, but it's important that I get somewhere. And the cat says, well, you're going to get somewhere. That's a given, right? And that's a paraphrase. In the Bob Dylan song, it's kind of a catchy tune, but if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So purpose allows you to dig in, gives you clarity, because it tells you which road am I going, where do I want to go, so that when I face the fork in the road, I have some way to evaluate, do I turn left or do I turn right? Purpose empowers and emboldens. When we're living a life with purpose, we're able to go out and go, hey, I need to accomplish this task. I'm going to accomplish this task. I have the ability to accomplish this task because it's in the service of a greater purpose. It's in the service of getting something done. It kind of takes away some of the fears and some of the anxieties, gives us a ground to stand on. Purpose makes us, after that, purpose makes us resilient. Rocky, one of the best speeches of all the movies, is in the latest Rocky, not the Creed, but the latest Rocky, which is several years old now. But he's talking to his son. They've kind of grown apart. They have a distant relationship. His adult son is talking about how life's not fair and stuff like that. And Rocky basically says, life's not going to be fair. It's never going to be fair. Nothing can hit you harder than life. But the measure of success isn't how hard you can get hit. It's how hard you can get hit and keep going. Purpose is what allows you to keep going. You have to have a purpose to get back up. You know, if you've watched the boxing movies or watched a boxing match or a mixed martial arts match or anything like that, when you get knocked down and there's a guy or a girl that's ready to pound you into the ground as soon as you move or as soon as the referee gets away from you, you have to have a purpose in getting back up. Or you don't get back up. You lay there. You know, you've got to have a reason to get back up. So purpose gives us resilience. Now, purpose also creates engagement. When you have a purpose, when you share that purpose, when you get people on board with that purpose, then the group engages. And the group is able to move forward together and really accomplish great things as a team. Purpose really fosters engagement. And then purpose keeps us focused on what matters the most and not what is around us. And this is in reference to the phrase that the grass is always greener on the other side. I think that the grass is greener sometimes on the other side because we don't know what we're doing with the plot of land that we've got. And so we look around and we see, hey, so-and-so built a nice gazebo on their plot and they're entertaining people and everything like that, and I'm not doing anything with mine. So, boy, life would just be a lot easier if I wanted to cross the fence and set in their gazebo and it was already done. So sometimes the grass is greener because the work isn't defined, and we know that there's a lot of work, and we feel that there's a lot of work, but we don't know where we're going, and we don't want we don't want to put in the work. So purpose allows us to focus on what's important. And make those decisions and kind of tune out the things that aren't important, to create a filter to get rid of the things that aren't important in life. So as we look through the second part here, we're going to take a break in just a second and listen to the word from the sponsor. But as we go through the second part, I'm going to kind of look at what happens when you don't have purpose, what kind of effects there are in a company when you don't have purpose, and with people when you don't have purpose. And then we're going to talk about kind of some rules for how to work with purpose, how to develop purpose, how to carve out the distractions in order to determine your purpose. But before I do that, I want to leave you with this quote before we jump to the next section. This is from Chief Seattle, a Native American chief. And he says, when you know who you are, when your mission is clear, and when you burn with the inner fire of unbreakable will, no cold can touch your heart. No deluge can dampen your purpose. You know that you are alive. And that's that question I asked at the beginning. How do you know that you're alive? According to Chief Seattle, it's when you have a purpose. When you know who you are. When your mission's clear. When you have an inner fire of unbreakable will, you know that you are alive. So think about that. We're going to take a second to hear from our sponsor, and then we'll be back with some more about finding purpose. Thank you. All right, thank you. We're back, and we're going to talk a little bit about what I consider to be one of the better documentaries of our time. It's one of the really true to life, one of those things where I'm warning you, if you watch it, you'll be cringing at why aren't the filmmakers, why aren't the documentary people jumping in and putting an end to some of the tragedy that you see going on in this film. If you've ever watched like some of those survival shows on the I think National Geographic or Discovery or whatever, where they throw people in the middle of the wilderness and then they have to not to survive, and there's everything from Bear Grylls to Man vs. Wild to Naked and Afraid, which I don't know who came up with that concept, but I'm more worried about the people who think, wow, that's a good idea. Let's go somewhere where sunburn and insect bites and things like that are extremely prevalent, and go without protective clothing of any kind. That seems like a stellar idea from the outset. But anyways, if you ever watched any of those shows, you know that they run into tribulations and trials with it. And for the people that don't run into them and things go easy, they don't put those on TV because they're not dramatic. They don't drive the ratings and things like that. But sometimes you see, I was watching an episode where someone got a cut and it started to get infected. And, the cardinal rule is you don't interfere. Eventually it got so bad that the team actually had to step in and administer some medical care and then say, look, if this doesn't change by, tomorrow morning, then you're out. You've got to go home. And so, you always know when you're watching those shows, there's somebody watching from afar that can jump in at any time, and sometimes you want them to jump in and fix it. So with this one, with this documentary, you think about, man, these guys' lives are kind of messed up, and why is it someone jumping in and saying something about it? So the documentary is about someone who's unsatisfied with life. His name's Peter, and at the beginning of the documentary, his work has no clear meaning. He thinks that there's really no point in going to work. There's really no point in doing anything with his job. His boss doesn't really do anything inspiring. His boss is very monotone, has no passion, has no distinction, and just randomly comes in and asks people to work overtime and doesn't give any explanation. There's no connection between why the overtime is important or what the mission is that needs to be accomplished through this overtime. And so he's really just despondent about things. His relationship's not happy. His girlfriend, he thinks, may not be being faithful to him. He's really in a bad place. His girlfriend convinces him to talk to a hypnotist. And the hypnotist says, basically asks him what's going on, and his response is basically, I think that this is the best it's ever going to get. Now that's a hopeless quote. I think this is the best that it's ever going to get, and so he doesn't want to move forward from that. There's just no motivation, no drive to go anywhere else because he thinks the way life is the best it's ever going to get. And the hypnotist even asked him, was today your worst day ever? And he said, yeah, pretty much. And he said, well, that's pretty bad. So this hypnotist says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hypnotize you, and I'm going to hypnotize you into not caring. So basically what happens is the hypnotist hypnotizes him into not caring, and then the hypnotist dies before he can bring the guy out to teach the lesson or whatever it is. But essentially what's happened is he's treated the symptoms of the hypnotist wants him, or tells him he's not going to have any worries or concerns or anything. He's just going to be free, and everything is great, and so he's treating the symptom, right? Those things are symptoms of what's going on. The root cause is there's no purpose in his life, but the symptoms of that are depression, anxiety, over-concern, worry, paranoia, all these things. So he goes back to work the next week, and with this new concern where he's not worried about things, he's not concerned about things, he kind of does things his own way. Well, the company's not making any money. They're not inspiring purpose. They're not connecting people. The company's not making any money. The people that work around him aren't inspired to do anything. And so they bring in people to help figure out where they can cut costs. And so these people start interviewing people. And the carefree attitude that he displays looks like certainty in his life. It looks like accomplishment, even though there hasn't been any accomplishment. In fact, he's gone from at least trying to work at this point to not doing anything at all, right? And so the people that come in to interview him ask him, "What are you doing here?" And he basically says, "Absolutely nothing," but in such a way that they go, "Man, this guy, we want to keep him, and these other people that are just kind of walking around dreary and dull, we don't want them around because, who wants dreary and dull? Everybody wants exciting and fun, even in business, right?" So he finds out he's getting promoted, his friends are getting fired, and they don't have any purpose that gives them a moral compass, and so they really go the wrong way. They start talking about stealing. There's talk about drug trafficking. There's lying. There's the fraud. All sorts of things that they work through that they justify because they say that the company has mistreated them. And so they justify these things through that. And there's a couple other tragic tales going on in the documentary as well. So there's a person who's completely ignored by everybody around them consistently and treated as disposable. And you see the very damaging effects that has on that person. And then you have a person who's asked to put on certain trappings that show, hey, this is why I'm happy to be here. This is my enthusiasm and everything like that. But they're not giving any reason to, and so they're asking questions. Well, how many of these medallion or these things do you want me to display? And he's like, well, it's up to you, but we want you to show the spirit of the company. But they haven't given the company any spirit, when they're talking about it, and so they don't have any purpose. They don't like their job. They end up quitting their job and going to another job where they do find a little bit more happiness. And then there's one guy who's suicidal and goes into his garage to commit suicide, and then realizes that loving his wife is his purpose, then gets horribly injured, but despite that, has a lot of happiness and really looks at everything in a positive light. So this search for purpose leads these people into crime, leads them into stealing, like I said, talks about drug trafficking, seeking people out to get advice on how to cover up crimes, things like that. And ultimately the company fails, literally burns to the ground. And at the end of it, the person, the center of the documentary here, he finds purpose in hard work, building things with his hands, and likes life. And of course, if you haven't figured out by now, I'm not talking about a documentary. I'm talking about Office Space by Mike Judge, which is still probably as close to a representation of living life in the cubes as you can get even today. Office Space ages extremely well when it comes to depicting a lot of times the feeling of working in a company that doesn't have a purpose and doesn't have a need or a drive that it imparts to its employees. And I kind of went through that. And of course, I'm not trying to make light of anything that is experienced by people. Just trying to illustrate that that story is ultimately, in my mind, a story about people lacking purpose, and all of the things that happen is because they lack purpose in life. And so they need to connect, they need to find purpose, they need to get going in life. And so that sets up the next question: how do you get purpose? So the first thing, as a leader, why am I leading? Or why do I desire leadership? You got to ask yourself that. You have to know that question. Why do I want to lead? Why do I want to have the responsibility for other people on my shoulders? That's what leadership is. And so you're taking on extra responsibility. And so you need to know what it is. And you need to be honest with yourself. If it's for power, does that translate to a purpose in life? Is it ultimately to guide people to finding their purpose and to accomplishing a shared goal? That is a purpose in life. Honestly, assess yourself and your environment. Is the environment that I am in conducive to me living a purposeful life? Are the people I'm associating with, is the company I'm working for, are the values of the things around me compatible with my values that will help me live a purposeful life? Know your strengths and weaknesses. You have to inventory your strengths and weaknesses. And this is so that once you find purpose, you can start moving forward. When you know your purpose and you've defined your purpose, you can really move forward without distraction. Because here's what you do. You accentuate your strengths. You take steps to build your strengths. A lot of people want to focus on fixing their weaknesses. That's what team is for. That's what a team is for. You focus on building your strengths, and then you hire or delegate to people that compensate for your weaknesses. And see, that's the beauty of having a team. It's like gears meshing together to perform a function that where I have a gap, someone else has a strength. And when that works together and I move, that moves them, and it causes the machine to function. And that cog, that gear effect, think about the spokes on the gear as strengths, and the meshing of those is what it looks like when an effective leader builds an effective team to move things forward. And then, I already said do a value check to see if what you're going for is of value. And what I mean by this is, again, like I said at the beginning, about having $1 million is not a purposeful goal. It's a needful goal. It's a desireful goal, but it's not purposeful. Purposeful goals transcend. They transcend your immediate, not needs, but they transcend your wants. I'll put it that way. So, does your purpose transcend your wants? That's the question. And here's a good check for it. Am I willing to sacrifice to hit this goal, and will I have a clear conscience when I hit this goal? Because you may be willing to sacrifice for the $1 million, but we all know that people, don't always live a right life hitting toward their goals. And if you're sacrificing your conscience for the goal, then you're not living a life of purpose. And then finally, one of the things that helps once you've really figured this out, once you've taken your inventories, once you've kind of decided why am I leading, what is my purpose, what are my visions, is my environment conducive, what are my strengths that can help me get to this purpose, this is how to lead with purpose. There's one more thing you need to do, and this has been said to me in the past, and honestly, it usually irritates me when it's said to me. I've never been in the military, but I've been friends with several people who are, but I've been told, stay in your AO. And AO in this case refers to area of operations. And here's what that means to me in this context. That means that you can only influence your area. So you may be a team lead and disagree with a division lead. You may be a supervisor or a senior and disagree with the manager. You may be a manager and disagree with a director. You may be a director and disagree with an executive. You can't change directly that dynamic. So you need to stay in your AO. In other words, put your energy into fulfilling the purpose that you have in the group that you're in. And you will get more results that way with your team than you will by spinning wheels trying to change things that are outside of your area of operation, your AO. And so if you want to influence the leaders around you, do so by focusing on the people and the things that you're responsible for, not the things that you're not responsible for. All of us want to sit around the water cooler and take shots at people whose shoes we are not in. And we all feel like we know more than what they know. And the truth is, there's information at every level that we don't have, and that influences decisions that are made. And whether or not the person that you disagree with is living a life of purpose and pushing that does not impact, or it does impact. It does not it does not defeat your ability to live and drive purpose in your area of responsibility, in your area of operations. And when you drive your area, your influence grows and you become able to influence them. So unless those above you that you disagree with are pushing you in a way that is fundamentally immoral or illegal, or something that causes you to feel like you've betrayed not just a feeling of justice, but actually betraying a core value, then stay in your AO and make your AO great. Help the people in your AO find their purpose. Inspire them. Help them to move forward. Help them to push forward. And, it's hard to find your purpose. Sometimes you need to have a conversation with a Cheshire cat and ask them, where do I go? And then hear the response, do you have a place you want to go? And have to start asking yourself, where is it that I want to go? So sometimes reaching out to someone outside is the proper thing to do. There's value in seeking out wisdom. And you can find purpose in life. You can figure out your purpose. You can define your purpose. You can develop this inner fire of unbreakable will that Chief Seattle talked about when you go and do the honest assessment of who you are, where you're at, and where you want to go. So, hey, let me know. Do you disagree with me? Do you agree with me? Do you have stories you want to talk about? Do you want to come on the show and talk with me? Then send me a message at panning@sharpstonegroup.com, or in the show notes or the description, there'll be my LinkedIn information where you can message me on LinkedIn, contact me. My website, sharpstonegroup.com, is the company. Let me know. Let's interact. I think that drives a much more valuable conversation. So until then, define your purpose. Figure out what your area of responsibility is. Figure out what your AO is. And then make it the best that you can possibly do.